Somos pueblos originarios, somos hijos del maíz. Con el estado de Arizona no se puede estar feliz. Son ratas y ratoneros, sáquenmelos por please. Ahora que ni ellos puedan controlar ni realizar de los sueños que ellos tienen, los vamos a despertar. Si tengo el nopal en la frente, también lo llevo de raíz. Somos pueblos originarios, somos hijos del maíz. Nos echan la 1070 que huele de arpaio. Ese maldito sheriff de Maricopa que se creía como angelito. Sea ángel o sea diablo, no nos puede tapar la verdad de ser pueblos originarios en las tierras ancestrales. Si tengo el nopal en la frente, también lo llevo de raíz. Somos pueblos originarios, somos hijos del maíz. Soy comité en defensa, defiendo a mi barrio. La cultura es mi escudo, la CDB es mi poder. Soy comité en defensa, defensa de mi barrio. La cultura es mi escudo, la CDB es mi poder. Si tengo el nopal en la frente, también lo tengo de raíz. Somos pueblos originarios, somos hijos del maíz. Los pueblos originarios y la raza de verdad, unidos libertaremos nuestra gente y nuestra paz. Las naciones originarias y la raza de verdad, unidos libertaremos nuestra tierra y nuestra paz. Si tengo el nopal en la frente, también lo llevo de raíz. Somos pueblos originarios, somos hijos del maíz. Somos hijos del maíz. En el mundo en que vivemos, ya no hay paz, ya no hay amor. Se volvió en puras problemas, puras guerras y dolor. Los primeros pueblos fueron los OTAN de nuestra nación, pero los gringos vinieron a hacerles reservación. Si tengo el nopal en la frente, también.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Reed. So glad to be here with you today for our webinar, Rethinking Thanksgiving, Healing This Broken Land, Indigenous Leadership in the Face of Climate Crisis. There's already over 500 people on this call, amazing. I'm part of Indigenous Solidarity Network, one of the groups organizing this webinar. I'm calling in from unceded Abenaki land in southern Vermont. I'm a white transmasculine settler wearing a black long sleeve pullover and have a solid gray background. In this first part, I'm going to pass it to my comrade Nico, who will translate what I said into Spanish.
Saludos a todos, todas y todos. Me llamo Nico. Voy a interpretar lo que dice Reed en esta primera parte. Nos complace darles la bienvenida al webinario Repensando el Día de Acción de Gracias, Sanando esta Tierra Rota. Ya tenemos más de 500 personas en este Zoom. ¡Qué increíble! Yo hago parte de 350.org, una de las organizaciones convocando este webinario. Actualmente estoy ubicado en el territorio Lenape, en Filadelfia. Soy un hombre cis con una sudadera negra con capucha.
This is Reed. The organizers of this webinar have a commitment to disability and language justice and believe these are essential tools in dismantling white supremacy and decolonizing. All of us dream in different languages, make plans in different languages, and even connect with the earth in different languages. As the deaf abolitionist organization HEARD says, the revolution must be accessible.
Habla Nico. Los organizadores de este webinario tienen un compromiso con la justicia lingüística y de discapacidades, y creemos que estos son herramientas básicas en el desmantelamiento de la supremacía blanca y para la descolonización. Todos soñamos en idiomas distintos, hacemos planes en idiomas distintos, e incluso conectamos con la tierra en diferentes.
We all dream, we all connect with the earth in different languages. As the abolitionist Deaf Peoples Organization HEARD says, the revolution must be accessible. Thank you.
This is Reed. Before we get started, I want to go over the accessibility features for today's webinar. If you'd like to listen to this webinar in Spanish, please select the interpretation globe icon in the Zoom menu bar. On your smartphone, click the 3 dots at the bottom of your screen and select the language. If you have any trouble accessing the Spanish language channel, you can reach out for support in chat. Both Nico and myself have access in front of our names to make it easier to find us in the chat menu.
Habla Nico. Antes de comenzar, quisiera repasar.
This is Nico. I'd like to go over the accessibility characteristics and for today's webinar. If you desire to listen to this webinar in Spanish, please select the globe icon on the lower right-hand side of the screen. If you are accessing from a cell phone, you can select the 3-dot icon in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen to select your preferred language. If you are having a hard time getting into the Spanish channel, Reed and I have access next to our name so you can find us easily.
This is Reed. Simultaneous Spanish interpretation will now start, provided by our wonderful Spanish interpreters, Andriana and Natalia. The ASL interpreters, Hercules and Amber, will be spotlighted, which means their video will be featured on the Zoom screen and show up next to the presenter's video. We also have live captioning available during this call, thanks to our partners at Caption First and Sharon and Tina, who are here with us today. To view live captions or a full transcript, click the CC icon on the Zoom menu bar. We will also include a link to a document that shows how to access captions. If we have any technical issues with Spanish or ASL interpretations or live captions, we will pause the webinar to correct the issue and make sure everyone can participate. Again, feel free to reach out and chat with any accessibility questions or concerns. Lastly, if you have questions for the presenters, please post those in the Q&A feature in the Zoom menu bar. Thank you so much for joining us, and I'll pass it over to Evie to kick us off.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eve Reyes-Aguirre. I am Iskaloteca Mexica Azteca, and I reside here in Autumn Territory. I am wearing a white blouse with green flowers, and I come to you live from the office of Tonatierra. I am very excited to be moderating this webinar. We have amazing speakers on our list, but before we start, we wanted to highlight a special dedication to a dear elder of mine and a big influence on the international Indigenous community, Tupak Enrique Acosta, 10 short days ago, joined the spirit world with our ancestors. We wanted to take a moment to honor him. He was highlighted last year in the Rethinking Thanksgiving webinar and gave a remarkable presentation on his life work and on the work of Indigenous nations on the international level. It is a great loss to the international community that we no longer have him here present with us, but he has left many instructions behind through the documents that he has written, through the work he has done on the international, national, and local level, through the music that he has produced on his SoundCloud, through YouTube videos on the Tonatierra YouTube channel, and through our website, tonatierra.org, you will find many blogs that he written about the work that he led for our organization. I'm going to pass it over to a dear friend of ours and ally, Raj Drew, who was very supportive of our work for many, many years at the United Nations. And I would like to also say thank you to Raj for all of the time that you took to assist our elder Tupak in so many ways. It meant so much for us to have allies like Raj and many others, our non-Indigenous relatives supporting our work. You are all valued for your capabilities and what you're able to bring to the table, not just for Indigenous causes, but also for human causes. And one of the topics we'll be talking about that affects all of us is climate change today. So I'm going to pass it over to Raj.
Everyone, thank you, Evie. My name is Raj. I use they, them pronouns. I'm a white trans femme person. I have some beautiful beaded earrings on that were done by a Haudenosaunee beater. I have glasses. I have a pink lipstick on. I'm here with Evie. Yesterday, we were at Tupak's memorial service where hundreds and hundreds of people gathered to honor Tupak, who spent decades and decades in this work. And we're sitting here in this beautiful space, and Tupak's altar is right in front of us, and just really feel his presence. He spoke on this webinar last year, and we want to dedicate this today to him. And we just have a few quotes here that we're going to read out loud. Tupak always said, "The time is now." Tupak said, "It's not what we want, it's what we will." It's the easiest and the hardest thing we need to do to be a we. And I just really think about that quote a lot and think about the work we have. And it's part of why we do this webinar, to bring us all together. And we are the original people. We are children of corn. Could you go to the next slide, please?
I'm now going to read a poem that Tupak wrote, and thought it would be appropriate to share with you all today. The title is Stars. There were stars before the sky was turned black by war guns of alien armies who wish to put flame to the land, searing scars of inhumanity and greed. The echoes still roar hollow-eyed sockets of false reality, still see those rockets, scorching the earth with titles of manifest destiny, against whom they stood. They who are we, Indigenous peoples, understood. The stars will return in the sky, by Tupak Enrique Acosta. We want to thank you again for joining us to this important webinar, and we thank you all for taking the step towards rethinking Thanksgiving. The reason why we chose the theme of this webinar was so that we can discuss Indigenous perspectives on how to effectively address climate change. There are many options that are being put forward by member states and governments on climate solutions, and they are missing a very important piece of the work. And the important piece is what Indigenous peoples have known all along, which is in order for us to restore balance, we must move forward in a way that is balanced with the earth. And we'll talk more about that today. But I did want to, at this time, invite Kristen from the Eastern Woodlands Rematriation to give us a grounding and some historical context.
Thank you so much, Evie. Thanks to the Indigenous Solidarity Network for hosting me. My name is Kristen, Natasa Kristen. I am calling in from Nipmuc territory, the ancestral homelands of my people. We are freshwater people. I'm just neighboring Boston, which is Massachusetts territory. And it's an honor and privilege to be able to give you this context and grounding in this webinar on rethinking Thanksgiving here in what is the birthplace of that story that we've all come to know as American history. My grandmother married into the Mashpee Wampanoag community, so these are my relatives, my kin. Nipmuc people are freshwater people. We are born into a really intricate network of waterways, of extended families, of diplomacy, of human and non-human kin. Nipi means water. We are it is us. There is no separation between myself and the lands that I'm born into. My grandmother, in marrying into the Mashpee Wampanoag community, means that my kinfolk are also people of the first light, people also known as the ones who greeted the pilgrims. And they are the ones that are of the Dawnland. As mentioned, we have a long history of diplomacy. And so much of what we've heard on the story of Thanksgiving as this time of celebration of harvest, I think we could interpret that as the way my ancestors practiced diplomacy. We are fisher people, we hunt, we're paddler people. We explore our waterways as our birthrights, and we know that we are born into sacred agreements that are formed in our cosmovision. So everything that we do today is in trajectory of those sacred agreements and the teachings about who we are and how we relate. And all of those teachings are codified in our languages, in our artwork, in the way that we form politically, and for where we live. I think it's important as we are rethinking Thanksgiving in this time of such tragedy and crisis, whether it be the rise of imperialism and the climate crisis. These things are intertwined. And just want to extend gratitude that we're here bearing witness to all of the speakers today who are going to talk about these lived realities as being Indigenous people, being of the land, and having to grapple with over 400, 500 years of colonization and imperialism. Where I come from, it's really where some of the first missionary work took place, at least on the Eastern Seaboard. It's where the 13 colonies formed. It's where the inspiration for America came. The folks who approached our shores were traveling these shores for hundreds of years, taking advantage of the cod, the plentiful fish that we had, taking advantage of our woodlands, deforesting our sacred forests to build their ships. They were no strangers to us. And I think it's really important that we think about the impact of that exploration on our people. So when the Pilgrims first arrived, they arrived to a shore where many of our people had succumbed to disease, which is really the outcome of this exploration, this early exploration. And coupled with the Doctrine of Discovery that was in place since 1493, there was this justification that if the lands were empty or void of any Christian religion, that meant that colonists could lay claim to that land. What we don't understand is that our people were well aware of what was happening and had much unease about the settlement that was taking place, and that all of our efforts, even joining colonists in their celebration of feast for surviving the first winter, was an effort for our people to practice diplomacy. It was not an attempt for us to celebrate as if we were okay with everything that was happening. And even though we're told that this is what the basis of Thanksgiving is, the holiday would not be formed until many, many years later. And really what was being celebrated at that time was our continued colonialism, the continued settlement, the fact that we succumbed to disease, the fact that we weren't able to fend our lands and territories because of warfare. We lost so much, and I think that's what's important for us as we're rethinking Thanksgiving, is to realize how much was lost in that process. Our ability to be sovereign, our ability to have our leadership respected, our ability to have our ways of connecting to this land and the sacred agreements that we held in caring for our human and non-human relatives, and making sure that these lands were available for the benefit of our children for years to come, and making sure that we remembered what our elders taught us. Those things were intentionally taken from us, but we still resist. We still know who we are. We still sing our songs. We still practice our language. We still fish the riverways. I think what's important to know too is just what happens when folks are privileged in telling this story. So again, just appreciating everyone being here, bearing witness to the stories that we will hear. I think in this time we can see just how much propaganda and false stories really provide a justification for colonialism when there is no justification. And so we're all taught to believe the story of peace and of friendship. And really what the story is all about is a celebration of our genocide. And so I think it's important to remember that, to ask these questions of who tells the story and who's privileged to shape that narrative. Because right now what we're witnessing in Palestine is an attempt to justify genocide by spreading false truths and false narratives. We too were called savages. We too were called heathens and terrorists. And the only thing that's consistent with our struggle as Indigenous people is that we've always struggled for life. We've struggled to be able to care for each other. And that struggle continues today. And my ask for all of you is that we remember this as we come to celebrate. Yes, celebrate the harvest, celebrate our families. We give thanks every day. But what we need is for people to stand up and privilege the folks who are marginalized and allowing to speak their truth and tell their stories. And yeah, that's my story to share with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kristen, for sharing your story, for sharing your words about your nation. It's important for all of our relatives, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, to know that there is two sides to every story, and we're not always given the truth. And I appreciate you mentioning the Doctrine of Discovery. For Indigenous peoples on this continent, we know that that has had a huge impact on the justification of colonial settler states to take our lands, to take our culture, and to commit genocide in the name of religion. We're seeing it play out currently with our relatives in Palestine. And I think the difference between what happened to Indigenous peoples on this continent and what's happening in Palestine is that we're not reading it in history books. We're not hearing about it in a history class at school. We're seeing it happen right now in front of us, live through social media, through the people that are living it, through the families that are suffering. And so I say, I feel hopeful that we're no longer able to hide the truth of what real genocide looks like and the justification of it. So with that, I would like to invite our next speaker, Joy Enomoto from the Hawaii Peace and Justice. Joy is a brilliant artist and combines her social justice work into her drawing, printmaking, and photography. So I'm going to pass it on to Joy now. Thank you.
Thank you. Aloha mai kako. My name is Joy Lehuanani Enomoto. I am calling to you today from Manoa Valley in Oahu, in the illegally occupied by the United States, Hawaii. I want to thank Serge for inviting me to speak today and to be among these amazing fellow panelists. I'm currently wearing glasses and I'm wearing a green t-shirt. I am a Kanaka Maoli butch woman. Yes, we still exist. I want to begin today by saying we didn't have Thanksgiving. We in Hawaii celebrated what is known as makahiki. Makahiki, which coincides with the rise of the Makali'i star in the sky, or the Pleiades for others, that rises up at the end of October and or early November, really was a sign to us that this is the time for harvest, for rest, and for the end of war. War was completely considered forbidden during this time, and this time lasts for 4 months. I want us to think about in the context that when the overthrow of the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom took place by the sons of missionaries, it was during makahiki, at the end of makahiki. That meant that we were not allowed to rest leading up to those events. That meant that in this moment, while there's a genocide taking place in Palestine, that meant that for centuries, the need of the West to continue the violence of war during our need for rest, for times that we have forbidden war, they are making us stay at what I'd call a high cortisol level. right? Our stress levels. And I also want us to think about this, that in the time of the illegal overthrow, that Hawaii had gone through one of the largest population collapses of any people anywhere in the world. Every Hawaiian that you see today is the descendant of the last 4% who survived what was a cultural and physical genocide through disease and murder and displacement. So we have a deep and unwavering love for the people of Palestine. We have a deep and unwavering love for all the peoples of the Pacific who have been occupied, right? Who have been occupied, particularly those like Guahan and Puerto Rico, and which is not obviously, which is in the Atlantic, but is on the other side. But we were all swept. Hawaii, Philippines, Guam, Cuba, Puerto Rico, all swept up in 1898 by the US as their new possessions. These are the countries that we love, unwavering, but we also have an unwavering love for those countries that are constantly facing cultural and political genocide. Currently, that is taking place in West Papua, in Papua New Guinea, by the Indonesian army. And all of those people, all of the people that are being trained toward genocide are actually being trained in Hawaii, because we are the most militarily occupied place in the Pacific, meaning that we are the head of the Indo-Pacific Command. We are consistently listening to the sounds of ospreys and military helicopters. And when the plantation sugar planters came, the only way they could take our kingdom was because of the backing of the US military. And the US military wanted Pearl Harbor, or what we know as Pu'uloa. Why do I talk about the wanting of places like harbors and water, right? Our water is actually inexplicably tied to our displacement and to our genocide. When the sons of missionaries decided that they wanted to become sugar planters, they looked at our system of water management, which was managing water from the mountain to the sea, right? From the mountains to the sea. Water would flow, it would feed our, what we call lo'i, or our taro farms. It would feed, we had fish ponds at the end, at the shoreline. We fed more than 2 million people through that system. The sugar planters, the settlers, those who came in only saw water that they deemed wasted. And they proceeded to not only displace us from our land, but they consistently displaced us from our water, right? They would reroute our streams. And so a century of that, of displacing us from our land, of driving us, which was in essence killing us, and we were fighting against consistently to this day, led to the events of August 8th, 2023 in Lahaina, which was our original capital, which was currently what was previously known as the Venice of the Pacific, led to driven by the winds of Typhoon Dora that was hundreds of miles away, but gave us 70-mile-an-hour winds. What that did was there were conditions that allowed for a wildfire that devastated and turned one of our most sacred and important sites into ash for thousands of people. 9,000 people were immediately displaced. And what was the state's response in this place that is always considered to be militarily ready for anything? What did they send? Nothing. We saved us. We helped us. We were the first to send boats. We were the first to send rescue teams. They sent us the police, who wanted to secure property or what was left of property from looting. They sent, they crippled the hands of the fire department by wanting to get into arguments about who is supposed to do what. They did not send the Navy or the Coast Guard the way that they should have. And so we were left to feed us. We were left to protect us in this place that is so militarily ready for war, but could not help its own people when this happened. These are all the things that we're dealing with as we enter this Makahiki season. From the fires of August 8th, followed 2 months later by the genocide that is taking place in Palestine, we are having to hold and think about all of these things with no opportunity to truly rest. And that leads us to when we think about climate justice, you cannot separate it ever from the US military. You cannot separate it from our militarized places. We cannot put these things in neat pockets. The military through war drives climate change. Climate change does not drive war. And I want us to be really, really clear about this, that the military and war drives climate change, climate catastrophes. They do not protect us, we protect us. We are the genuine security. And when we rethink it that way, then we know what we need to do. And I say, and I'm giving a shout out to all of my comrades in Guahan, in Okinawa, in PNG, in New Zealand, in all of the places in all of the Pacific that are always forgotten, that are fighting constantly the US military occupation. We love these places and we stand by these places. And as we strive for rest, as we strive for peace, let us always remember that we can do this together. And that, well, I just want to say, free Palestine. Mahalo.
Thank you so much, Joy, for your powerful words. This is Evie. And again, I want to thank Joy for shedding light on what we have seen to be the case when it comes to how the US government reacts to helping Indigenous and so-called minority communities, as opposed to when they are called for help with military assistance, how they are very quick to respond when it comes to an ally requesting military help to commit genocide. And we've seen this happen throughout history. We're seeing it happen today. And it's important to know that Indigenous peoples have the answers to assisting with issues of climate change. As evidenced, as Joy mentioned, her people jumped into action when it was time to respond, when it was time to support each other. We know this is our way. We can help each other. We have the answers and the solutions for ourselves, but our resources have been taken from us in order to do that. And so unfortunately, we try to do our best to help and support one another, but our hearts have always been that way. It's in our DNA. And we know that watching what's happening in Palestine is definitely bringing up historical trauma for Indigenous peoples on this continent. So thank you again, Joy, for your words, for sharing your story, for highlighting the militarization and the complicitness of the US government in this current war. So at this time, I'd like to invite our next speaker, Mikaela. Michaela Curry is part of the Indigenous Solidarity Network, and Indigenous Solidarity Network has been so instrumental in helping Indigenous peoples as an ally for many years. So we're very grateful to you. So thank you, Mikaela.
Thank you, Evie. I'm so grateful to you as well. Hey, y'all, I'm Michaela Curry. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman with long, curly, dark hair. I'm wearing a black shirt with a red and blue floral scarf. I'm calling in from the land of the Catawba and Eastern Cherokee here in Western North Carolina. And as already mentioned, I'm with Indigenous Solidarity Network, which is one of the organizations hosting this webinar. I really appreciate all of y'all being here and taking the time to be here today. We've heard from Evie, from Kristen, and from Joy, and I'm really honored to speak following such brilliant wisdom. I'd like to invite everyone on the call to just pause and take a breath. And I invite you to notice what's happening in your body, what thoughts are coming through your mind, what your heart feels like. I'd like you to reflect on the things that we've heard so far. And if there's been something that's moved you, I invite you to put a heart emoji in the chat. And I also invite you to make a donation, to put your money where your heart is, and to make a donation to one of these incredible Indigenous-led organizations that is out here doing such important work. There's a link in the chat to make a donation. You might notice that 350 and Surge are listed as fund recipients. Please know that these two organizations are acting as fiscal sponsors, and they'll be passing along all the money raised to the Indigenous organizations represented here tonight: Tonatierra, American Law Alliance, Eastern Woodlands Rematriation, Honor the Earth, and Hawai'i Peace and Justice. I want to remind y'all that every donation is meaningful. There's not a donation too small, and there's certainly not one too large. We're all in different places. We all have different resources, but every donation is meaningful when you give from your heart and when you give for something that you really believe in. It causes a shift. It causes a shift in yourself. It causes a shift in the rest of us, and it sends positive energy in the direction of action. And one of the best ways to show gratitude is through action. So again, I invite you to find the link in the chat and make a donation. I'm really grateful to be here with y'all tonight. I'd love to tell you a little bit of how I came into this work, how I came to be part of Indigenous Solidarity Network, and why I think it's important. So like many other settlers on this call, members of my family came to this land from somewhere else, assimilating into this colonial system. I grew up working class in a very rural area. I spent a lot of time outside. I consider that to be one of the best things that ever happened to me, because I was able to learn a lot from the forests and creeks that I spent a lot of time by myself exploring. As an adult, the place that I live, Appalachia, is really important to me. I'm speaking tonight also because I am someone who works in climate and environmental science. My educational background is in that. I've worked as a field scientist, and I currently work on climate justice and climate policy. And it's the time in the woods, the time in nature that led me to study these things. There was a witnessing of the destruction and devastation of places that were important to me, that I valued, that led me into wanting to do this work. But it was the relationships that I've been able to build with Indigenous people that have really helped me to understand my place in this work, especially the patient teachings from Indigenous women who I've been lucky enough to have in my life and to learn from, and who helped me realize that so much of the hurt that I felt, both in witnessing things around me, but also the deep hurt that I felt within myself, is connected to my absence from culture, is connected to my absence from connection to land. And it's my stakes too. I think that sometimes it can seem like, oh, well, we're helping with this struggle or that struggle. But really, every struggle is our struggle too. Because as long as these things are happening to someone, they could happen to anyone, and they could happen to everyone. And I think we see that now in this global moment, what it means for us to witness this escalating violence and war crimes in real time. And what it means to be an involuntary, or what feels like, an involuntary part of these systems that indebt us to them, that force us to continue to sacrifice ourselves, to sacrifice our beliefs for our survival. And I'm in this work because I believe that we all have a part to build a transformed world, and the transformation of the world that we need requires a return to balance and sacred relationships, which our Indigenous relatives again and again show us the way for. Because what's happened over hundreds of years, others have mentioned the Doctrine of Discovery, which gave authority to white Christians across the globe to claim land that was already lived on. It's what we see happening, playing out in real time now, Palestine. And when people are disconnected from their land, when people are disconnected from practices that connect them to where they live and to each other, anything can be done. Anything can be done when you don't have a framework of understanding, connection, and practice. I'm also a parent. So a big part of the reason that I'm in this work is because of the future that I hope for and I'm afraid for my child. When my child was about 3 years old, we were living in Eastern Kentucky, and we lived really close to a mountaintop removal site, and it was devastating. But I would go by and take pictures because if nothing else, I felt like I needed to bear witness to what was happening. And so one time when I was stopped taking a picture, and I pulled the car back on the road and I started driving, and my child's small voice from the back seat said, "Mommy, how long will it take the mountain to grow back?" And I can't tell you how often I still think about that, and how I think about the naivete in his question of believing both in the inevitable good, the inevitable regeneration potential in us all, but also at not understanding. And how when you look at violence being enacted, if you don't have an understanding of what you're looking at, it can be easy to miss it, or to not understand where you're connected to it or how you are enabling it. And so I just want to, take another breath together. I mentioned earlier noticing how you're feeling, and I say that for myself as much as for anybody else. So we are in times of escalating crisis, violence, and grief. And the same systems that enact these crises upon us have been enacting violence and crisis upon Indigenous people for a devastating amount of time. But we can turn to them for leadership and for finding our place in things, for understanding what is happening and what role we have. And part of that is a deep connection with each other. Because the same systems that have these crises on us demand that we remain in service to them, no matter the circumstances. It teaches us and forces us into patterns of numbness and disconnection. And we become trapped in order to feel like we are surviving. And it's built this way on purpose, for purpose. Again, we're not doing any of this for someone else. We're doing this for ourselves. We all face this crisis. We all need clean water. We all need clean air. And the eroding of Indigenous sovereignty is the eroding of personal sovereignty and freedom everywhere. We have to engage in practices of connection. And that starts with land as well, with understanding where we are in the world, what has happened, what the Doctrine of Discovery has enabled, how it's set up the root of the system of colonization and the systems that use military and police force to protect profits at the expense of everyone. I think, like many on this call, I've been thinking a lot of Tupak and the words that he said to us last year. And one of the things that really stood out to me is he asked, who is the first victim of colonization? And he said, it's the colonizer. Because what you have to do to yourself in order to do this to others is demoralizing and destabilizing to all of us. Reflect on Joy's words about always having resources for war and resources for violence, but not the resources to connect us, to support us, to help us recover from the increasing amount of climate emergencies that we're facing. So again, at this time, I just really invite you, if any of this is moving you, I invite you to think of ways that you can connect in your community, ways that you can connect with the Indigenous folks leading work where you are. But I also invite you to go to the link in the chat to make a donation. Whatever amount you can give will help, will support all of the work being led by these powerful organizations on this call today. I'm so appreciative again to everyone for being here. And I'll pass it back to you, Evie. Thank you.
This is Evie. Thank you so much, Michaela, for your powerful words. As you were speaking, I was thinking exactly of the same thought that Tupak shared last year about how colonization has affected colonizers and the children of colonizers. And that was a very important thing to consider when we talk about colonization. It's also important to remember the process of decolonization. That is something that every one of us can do. We are no longer fighting for this planet for Indigenous peoples. We are fighting for this planet for humanity. Like Joy said, water is life. She talked about the water. It's a sacred thing. And we have, as Indigenous peoples, we know how to live on this planet in harmony and in balance. And we've done so since time immemorial. And so when we look to the future about how to address this crisis that we're in, it's important to listen to the wisdom and the knowledge that Indigenous peoples carry, because we are connected to our lands. We are connected to our territories. And we have that traditional ancient knowledge that our ancestors have passed on down to us and that we will pass on to our children. So I thank you again. And I also wanted to share another quote when Tupak says, "The time is now." That word time, T-I-M-E, he emphasizes that that is the territorial integrity of Mother Earth. And that is what we're looking at right now. That is what hangs in the balance. And so it's up to us, all of us, as children of Mother Earth, to do our part to protect our mother for our future generations. So with that, I'd like to take the moment to pass on to our next speaker, who is going to introduce a wonderful film that follows a few Indigenous communities and the struggles that they face. So I'd like to welcome Berkeley Carnine. Thank you.
Thank you, Evie. Welcome all. My name's Berkeley, and I'm a part of the Indigenous Solidarity Network as well. I'm calling in from Autumn Lands, although I live in occupied Kalapuya territory in Eugene, Oregon. And I'm a white queer settler wearing a turquoise bandana, gray shirt, and a jean jacket with a Teamsters button, and have light brown hair. And I'm introducing the film Powerlands, which we're going to watch the trailer of, because it's an incredibly powerful documentary made by a Native filmmaker with a lot to show us about
enforcement
possibilities of resistance between communities around the world impacted by corporations and extreme resource extraction and green colonialism, and about the kinds of resistance. I know the filmmaker. I knew her grandmother from the organizing I was a part of on Black Mesa as a part of a solidarity collective. Ivy Camille Minibeed So, the director, I met when she was a teenager and a part of a Native youth media collective out of Your Backpack Media. And when one of the producers, Jordan Flattery, reached out to see about doing some filming on Black Mesa about the resistance to Peabody Coal's forced relocation of Dene Navajo people and of the almost at this point 50-year resistance, Ivy Camille got to connect and then went on to become the director of the film. And seeing her this summer, I heard about the kind of movement weaving that they've been able to do with this film, and traveling around the world with it and making connections between communities that are resisting, yes, similar forces of green colonialism and extreme extraction. The film is based in Black Mesa, Colombia, Southern Mexico, and the Philippines. And we're going to drop a survey in the chat that gives some follow-up ways to be involved. And one of them I wanted to offer is to support people in bringing this film to your own communities and connecting with local Indigenous-led land and water protection. And where I live, that's cultural fire practices that are being brought back, and to use this film as an organizing opportunity. So in the chat, there's a survey, and if you're interested in screening this, be in touch, and yeah, we'll reach out and we can host a series of community-based screenings. And let's keep the fundraising going. Okay, thanks so much. We'll watch the trailer now.
Check it out. The whole
They're trying
article
to say
36.
we don't
Check it
exist.
out.
We are indigenous people to this
So we
land.
have no place to go.
We have the
Again.
roots growing right out of our
And how
feet.
long have we been
We
going?
belong here.
Tony and Garfield started going in 1984. When
It's not just our
debate
community
started.
that's affected this
And
way.
that's how-
There's so many
because they
indigenous
waited.
communities. There's
Even
so
though
many
they
people
waited,
of
they
color
waited
that have to
because
face
of
these realities every day.
Till they didn't
We are
want
not
anybody to
separate
argue with
from
them.
our
They have not
environment,
exhausted all the
and we have been
That's
damaged
the
in this
procedure.
whole
Yes,
process
If it's
of
international,
being
you have to exhaust all
colonized.
domestic remedies.
We show up to
So
act.
we did.
That's a procedure,
Mhm.
a legal procedure.
Right. 1984 that they went to the UN in Geneva, Switzerland.
Right.
That's a whole nother story of when they went.
1984.
Yes. And then they were there and they helped debate and they helped get that language, because by the time I came along, I was appointed in 1994. In 1994, when
If you can all allow us a moment to work through our technical difficulties, we will resume with the trailer in just a moment. It seems that Tupak wanted to join us from the spirit world and share some words with all of you. Through the computer, somehow he came through. So I'm grateful for that, but also I want to make sure we have time to show our videos. So please bear with us. Thank you.
They're trying to say we don't exist. We are indigenous people to this land. We have the roots growing right out of our feet. We belong here.
It's not just our community that's affected this way. There's so many indigenous communities. There's so many people of color that have to face these realities every day.
We are not separate from our environment, and we have been damaged in this whole process of being colonized.
We show up to action with just ourselves, with our prayers, with our voices, and that's power. That's the power that makes them shiver in their little SWAT gear.
You put our backs against the wall, we put one foot in front of the other, and we face the storm like our brothers, the buffalo. We face the storm. We are not backing down ever again.
This is Evie. Thank you to our technical team for restoring that video so that our relatives here can have the opportunity to see the video. Again, if you're interested in more information, you can find a link in the chat for that, and how possibly you may be able to show that film in your community. So as we move on, I have the honor of introducing a dear friend, a colleague, and a sister. Krystal Tubals from Honor the Earth has done extensive work in the international, national, local, and even here in my community. She's been here doing work as an ally for many years. So I'm very humbled and honored to introduce to you Krystal Tubals.
Thank you, Evie. Epeveshev, Mene Wostat Nanehav. I'm Krystal Tubals. I'm Oglala Lakota, Northern Cheyenne. I use she, her pronouns. I'm wearing teal and white beaded earrings with a silver necklace of Palestine and a pink t-shirt with black hair. So I usually call in from Northern Cheyenne Territory in southeastern Montana or Lakota Territory in South Dakota. But today I'm calling in from the territories down here. I'm actually just a couple blocks away from Evie in Raj at this moment. But I'm just really honored to be here, and thank you to all the speakers that spoke before me. It really was grounding for me. I think I kind of want to jump into just the conversation around, Joy brought this up around climate change and what that is a direct result of. And so I'm currently the executive director of Honor the Earth, and right now we're moving and we're naming that climate change is the direct result of settler colonialism, of white supremacy and racial capitalism. Right. And so as we're organizing and we're continuing to commit to this work that each of us has here, and that each of us has spoken about and are speaking about right now, we want to keep that in mind, that we have to organize at the roots. I think it was Tupak himself that taught me that we have to define our battlefield. Every time that we fight fights on someone else's battlefield, we're already losing. And so when we're fighting within these colonial structures, against these colonial structures, we really have the odds against us. And so he taught me that it was very important to be defining our battlefields. And so that's something I keep in mind, especially when it comes to the Doctrine of Discovery, which I know Kristen early spoke about it, but just wanted to add the piece of like why that's relevant for all of this. So I really hope this is a very simplified version of how I carry the work that I do, but I go all the way back to the Doctrine of Discovery. And I think about how that allowed people to come in and to claim our lands, right? Because there were no Christians here. And so our lands were claimed, then began the process of settler colonization, right? Removing us and replacing us with a whole different population. From that point, it was all enforced by the US military. Before the US military was even a thing, it was actually formed around Indigenous resistance. And so that simple template there was really taken and used to invade other Indigenous peoples' lands overseas and to do the same thing, which is a very simplified way of looking at US imperialism, right? They used the military to justify going to other Indigenous peoples' lands, removing them, and then claiming the resources in the land in that place, right? But also, why did they do that? Our US officials and congressmen and representatives are supposed to be making decisions on our behalf, on the people's behalf, right? However, most of their campaigns are paid for by corporate lobbyists, right? And corporations. Those corporations want easy access to Indigenous people's lands that we protect. And so they pay, politicians make the decisions to keep us in endless wars for no reason. And we continue to invade lands, and we continue to steal resources, and we continue to kill Indigenous people and remove them. And all for capitalism, for the gain of corporations, right? Corporatism. And so I think it's important to always connect those dots whenever we're having these conversations, because it really connects us to Indigenous peoples globally. It reminds us that our struggles are not disconnected and that our oppressors speak to each other. And so therefore we need to speak, we need to be stronger together. We need to continue to make those relationships and fight alongside each other and to define our own battlefields. And so I really hold that. And I think as we continue this fight as well, it's really important to also understand that right now we're in a moment of time where so many false solutions are being presented to us, right? I think carbon credits was one of the first things when I first entered the organizing world of environmental justice that I start hearing about, where you could purchase those and then it offsets what you're allowed to pollute into the world. And it was just a ridiculous idea. And now today we're fighting some of the same things, but kind of in an escalated manner. So recently with Biden's, the Inflation Reduction Act, billions of dollars were pushed and set forward to go into a just transition, right? Quote unquote, a just transition. And so really what that money was going to was mining, because everyone wants to move to get electric cars and to move from fossil fuels to mining, to make that just transition, a green mining, right? A green transition. But I think as Indigenous peoples, we've always known better. We always know that these bright and shiny packages that they present to us are not always what they seem, right? And so we know that that's not what it was. And what that is green colonialism, because 85% of those minerals needed for lithium alone, 85% of those minerals exist on or near Indigenous lands globally. And so it's really important to think about those things, because as they're doing this like green transition, right, this just transition, they're actually continuing to sacrifice Indigenous lands. They're continuing to colonize. They want to remove us from these lands and gain access to those lands so that they can continue to mine, which is still colonialism, right? And so it's really important that we name things as such. And so that's why naming green colonialism, that is very important. Defining our battlefield is really important, but also it's really important to think about what the solutions are. And so I'll really kind of end with this and just thinking about, I think the environmental justice world and a lot of organizing spaces get hung up in whether or not Indigenous peoples are part of a solution or can present solutions, right? For climate change and the climate catastrophes that we experience. I don't think that's the question. I think I don't even think it's a question at all, right? And I think Tupak always said it's an eventuality. Indigenous peoples are the answers. We are the solutions, right? We have been protecting this land since time immemorial. We are the land, you know? And so I think it's important that we continue to hold those words of our folks that have gone on, that have taught us, and the words that we share with each other here today, that we continue to hold that, because we are stronger together, and our fights have to be connected. We have to be able to fight at the roots, and that means that we expand out to global struggles. And so with that, I'll wrap my section of this, and I think we're going to introduce one of my dear sisters as well. So I'm not sure if I introduce her or if y'all would want me to introduce her.
Krystal, we would love for you to introduce her.
Okay. All right, y'all. So that segue was very specific. I know there was a lot of shout outs to Free Palestine. And so, with that, I want to introduce, one of the closest people in the world to me, along with Evie, my sister, Nadya Tannous. She works alongside me, but she also, holds many, many different hats. And is one of the most loving and powerful people I know. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Nadya.
Krystal's gonna make me cry before I even get on here. Thank you for the really generous, kind introduction, and for having me here with you all today. My name is Nadya Tannous. I'm the Deputy Director of Honor the Earth, work with Krystal really closely, and I'm calling in from Ohlone territories, Huchun, the Confederated Village of Lishan Nation. I am Palestinian. My family is from Jaffa and Lid, along the coast. And 1/3 of the refugees in Gaza are from my area. So when I see what's happening in Palestine, I think something to note is that we as Palestinians see ourselves in each other very strongly. What I mean by that is that I could have easily been born in the Gaza Strip if during the Nakba, my family had waited even 10 minutes or had ran a different direction. But by miracle or luck, maybe, we were able to actually make it to a different region of Palestine. I think something that I wanted to note today is that being Palestinian my whole life and coming from a large, loving family of Palestinian people, I have spent most of my 30 years on this earth with folks in the majority not really understanding who we are, where we come from. The narrative around Palestine is still largely shaped by the colonial narratives that the United States itself is part of weaving and continuing to uphold. It's one that both diminishes Palestinian existence in our homelands and also tries to diminish our claims to them and to go home. This is also part of an effort that we see in the era of US and Israeli-led diplomacy in the region, particularly in this moment of the post-Oslo era after the Oslo Accords in 1993 and 1994, which really created the political landscape for what is happening now in the Gaza Strip to Palestinians inside of the 48 territories who are quote unquote citizens of the state of Israel, to Palestinians in Jerusalem, Palestinians in the West Bank, Palestinians in refugee camps in Lebanon and in Jordan, and also for those of us who are in the far diaspora. I name Oslo in particular rather than starting in the events more recently in October of this year, because it is Oslo that describes Palestinians in our different territories as having individual or separate futures from each other, rather than reaffirming the demands that we have always had as a people, which are total liberation and return. That means total liberation of our homeland from the river to the sea, return of all refugees, the freedom for political prisoners, and our demand for self-determination. These are demands that no Palestinian can barter or sell. No Palestinian can negotiate. They are our rights. They have been collectively agreed upon by the Palestinian people. Oslo, as a series of agreements that were facilitated by the United States, Israel, and the bureaucratic colonial portion of our population, or the people who look like us, speak like us, and are from us, who have sold out their people for very little in return, or the Palestinian Authority. They put forward this agreement that said that we Palestinians inside of 48 territories, or so-called Israel, we are an internal Israeli problem. For those Palestinians in the refugee camps in Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, we are an internal Lebanese, Jordanian, or Egyptian, Syrian problem. The Palestinian leadership can't help us. And for those of us who are in the far diaspora, like myself, who are born in the so-called United States, born in so-called Canada, we just have to become Americans. We have to become Canadians. We're expected to meld or break down into the melting pot of these settler colonial nations. And so, and reaffirming that we actually reject the Oslo Accords, which are the accords which broke down our community infrastructure where we lived, which decimated our grassroots committees and the infrastructure which kept us connected as a people across multiple countries and territories for over 75 years. In the process of rebuilding them and reaffirming our rights, not just as humans who deserve fresh water and food, freedom of movement and safety, but as human beings who deserve dignity and who deserve the right to be in our homelands, and who will sacrifice anything and everything in order to make that happen. We reaffirm in this moment also that we do not want to blend into the settler colonial myth of the United States and Canada, that we ourselves as Indigenous people to our own territories actually reject that these countries also have the right to exist as they currently do. And when I say that, I know that one of the first feelings that folks might have is fear. Because the question when I say that often is, okay, well, where do we go? If land back is about returning Indigenous lands back to Indigenous hands, what about those of us who are not Indigenous here? In the case of North America, I'm a Palestinian. I know that my demand and my future, inshallah, is to go home and to be home with my people. But what I know in that as well is that the future that is built through land back and through an alternative pathway forward led by Indigenous people does not include the same violence that the history of colonialism, which got us here, has provided us with. And so in that faith, I think, or in that steadfastness, that relentlessness, and not just working for our own dignity as Indigenous peoples, but working to be in right relationship with the other people in the context where we live, with the planet that we live on, trying to actually build a pathway forward in the face of immense odds, like genocide, which is not metaphorical, right? Genocide, you either live or you die, as so many of the speakers with me here have said. What we are fighting for is life, but we are Indigenous people. If the option is that we become permanently exiled, removed from each other, from our land forever, that is something that we do not accept. And so what I want to end with here is that what this moment in terms of ongoing Israeli military conquest and assault of the Palestinian people on the Gaza Strip is not about Jewish safety. What it's about is trying to continue a 75-year program of killing the Palestinian spirit. And in the face of bloodshed and slaughter, trying to make us capitulate to the settler colonial demands, that we stop being a nuisance, that we leave our homes, that we give up our rights and our demands to go home, and that we abandon our struggle. We have dealt with this for almost 100 years. And we are honored to be in community of Indigenous people around the world who have dealt with these pressures for over 500 and are still steadfast and relentless, knowing that we exist, we do not vanish into the folds of history, we fight for a dignified present, and that our future is inevitable. And it is one where we all live, we all make it, we all survive, and we all are able to participate in being part of the same ecosystem in concordance with each other and the planet and our political principles. I am not sure what the next few weeks holds for us as the Palestinian people. What I will say is that our demands continue to be a ceasefire now, lifting the siege on the Gaza Strip, and an end to all aid to Israel. Those are three central demands that can help reestablish our current position so that we can, in fact, see a future where Palestinians can have our freedom and our liberation, where there can be justice. And ceasefire is the floor politically. I want to say that to you all. Ceasefire is not a radical demand. It's a practical demand. And that is because there is no amount of humanitarian aid that can come into the Gaza Strip. There's no amount, no number of trucks that can come in that can undo what one night of Israeli bombing can do. Our people need a ceasefire. We demand a ceasefire. And from that, y'all, let's fight together and continue to work together to make sure that that's not where the buck stops. We, the Palestinian people, deserve our freedom after 75 years of exile, murder, imprisonment, and degradation. And I believe that we will have it. There will be a free Palestine in our lifetime. And may we, as well as all of us who live here, Indigenous and not, guests and settlers, whoever we are, may we always take the leadership of the Indigenous people, the people who should be at the front of getting us out of this current climate catastrophe by addressing its root causes, which are settler colonialism, racial capitalism, and white supremacy. May we fight in this moment that seeks to isolate us to actually build relationship. Thank you all so much for having me. Salam, Free Palestine.
Thank you so much. This is Evie. Thank you to my dear sister, Nadya. It's very difficult not to get emotional hearing your words. As Indigenous peoples of this continent, we stand in solidarity with the people of Palestine. We too have been displaced from our territory. We too have been victims of forced assimilation. And we too have been relocated. And we say relocation is genocide. It's a form of cultural genocide for our people. As Indigenous peoples, we have connection to our lands, our territories, and our waters. And so I say to you that stand strong, my dear sister. Our ancestors are with you, and we are resilient, just like them. We will move forward together, and we will stand in solidarity to fight with you, alongside you, with all of our ancestors behind us. At this time, I'd like to pass the camera back on to Mikaela to give us some instructions and information on how you can support all of these organizations that have a common goal of working together for all humanity in addressing the most urgent issue that we all face, which is climate change. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Evie. Just want to invite everyone again to take a breath, and also want to invite you to become a part of this work if this is new to you, or to move deeper into this work if it's not, by making a donation, the link shared in the chat. The last information I received, we had raised $6,388 tonight. That's coming from 89 folks who are on this call, and I think there's at least like 400 or 500 more. If everyone was able to give $10, we'd be able to meet and surpass our fundraising goals. These monies are going to go directly to the Indigenous-led organizations that you've heard from tonight, and you can be a part of supporting their work. In addition, as was stated at the beginning of the webinar tonight, this webinar is dedicated to our comrade, Tupak Enrique Acosta. He was 71 years old this year, and in his honor, we're seeking 71 people to become monthly donors for the organization that he helped found, Tonatierra. It's a community-based Indigenous Peoples organization. And if you're interested in helping honor his legacy and to support Indigenous sovereignty work, please fill out the form in the chat to express your interest in becoming a monthly donor. and remind you what Tupak told us. It's the easiest and the hardest thing we need to do, to be a we. And again, reminding y'all that so much of this feels overwhelming and isolating, and that's intentional. Because when we are isolated and overwhelmed, we are removed from action and connection. And action and connection are the things that we need to bring us to a different future. A future that we all deserve, that our children deserve, that our earth deserves, and that is possible. So I invite you to take a step towards action, to make a donation tonight. And I thank you to all the brilliant and wise speakers that we've heard from tonight. And so it's listening to Nadya. I was thinking again about what I was talking to y'all about earlier, about my own disconnection from history and from understanding, and for the things that I wasn't taught as a child or I didn't understand. I remember the first time that I saw the photo of settlers standing beside a giant mountain of bison skulls and understood the depravity and violence that occurred to disconnect Indigenous people from their food source, from their lands. And I think about that picture now, every time I see the photos of Palestinians hugging and clinging to their olive trees and mourning the places that they had tended and been connected to, and think about how all of these struggles are interconnected. Near where I live, where so many are involved in this fight against the unnecessary and the unsafe Mountain Valley Pipeline, these systems of extraction that use violence and enact violence upon us, it's not just the actual guns and bombs, although there's no shortage of that. It's the policies of violence that allow our water and our air to be polluted and people continue to die from, just for others to profit. And the lie of scarcity, that there isn't enough. There is enough. And it matters for us to be connected and to be in action. So again, just want to thank you for taking the action to be here tonight, to be listening, invite you to make a donation, and just really appreciate everyone's care and attention to this, and invite you to think about what your next step will be after this webinar, what Indigenous organizations and your community you're going to connect with, what people in your life you're going to connect with, and how we can work on this together. Because I just want to remind y'all that the good news is that other ways are possible. Colonization is not all the way it's been in all of history. There are other ways that we can learn and return to. We can learn from Indigenous leadership. The good news is that healing is possible, and there are steps that we can take. So I just want to appreciate again everyone for being here tonight. And I think I'll pass it back to you, Evie.
Thank you so much, Mikaela. At this time, we'd like to take the opportunity to do a short, brief question and answer portion for our speakers. We recognize we're short on time, and we recognize that we had many, many questions, and we may only have time to answer a few. I want to share that Joy from the Hawaii Peace and Justice is unfortunately had to jump off the call, but we have Krystal with us, we have Nadya, we have Kristen, and Mikaela and myself are here to answer questions. But first, I'd like to ask our panelists the first question. Can you give us some examples of success stories of people being able to protect Indigenous lands and cultures? Who would like to go first?
I can jump in. I would say, as someone who, dove headfirst into land back, that, there's 2.5 to 3 million acres of land that have been reclaimed and returned back to Indigenous peoples over the last 10 years. And so I would say that, that's a lot of success. It's anywhere from our relatives in the Pacific Northwest who have been able to get land returned back to them. Different nations have been able to buy land. Nations have been able to actually receive land that has been gifted back to them. Native-led, Indigenous-led organizations have been able to receive gifts of land back to them as well. And so that list is pretty extensive. And so just to say that there's a lot of examples, but the last we checked, it was around 2.5 to 3 million acres. And we're pretty outdated. We're probably like 8 months out of date on that. And so I'm betting once we catch up with our data that it's probably going to be a lot more. And so just to say that, like, organizing around land back just simply to reclaim land is one example that's been a huge success. That doesn't even include all of the different successes that have existed in terms of campaigns, pipeline battles, the different fights against mining, corporations, things like that we've also been fighting. So just adding that piece. Check.
Thank you, Krystal. And I know we've had this long discussion about land back and whether that meant metaphorically or literally. And just to be clear, we mean it literally. We really do. But it's important to note that this work couldn't have happened without non-Indigenous allies to help us. And so we want to absolutely uplift and highlight that we can make a difference together, but we have to do it together. We cannot do it alone. And at this time, we're looking at a very serious issue with our climate. We cannot survive without water. We cannot survive without food. And the way that these governments are continually to poisoning our planet, it doesn't look good for our children or our future generations. So I wanted to open it and see if there was another example that someone else would like to share about the successes of Indigenous peoples' lands and cultures being protected.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on what Krystal was sharing. I'm phoning in from my ancestral territory in what's now known as Millis, Mass. It's for us known as Bogwaso, which should be Shallow Brook area. And this is a reclaimed 64 acres. I come from people who were subject to the missionary work of John Eliot, and some of my ancestors are the original proprietors of Natick. So these were some of the first kind of internment camps at a time during the Indian uprising of what's known as King Philip's War in the 1600s. Us, even as the friendly Indians, were rounded up and forcefully removed in the middle of the night and sent to an island off Boston Harbor known as Year Island, with the intention of leaving us there for the winter to starve us. It would have been a time of harvest and of celebration of our food and caretaking those seeds and storing that food. We are actually, we reclaimed 64 acres in a settler house. Still kind of gives me the creeps, but all my elders tell me that if we weren't wanted here, we would know that by now. And yeah, this was one of the first settled houses west of Boston when Boston became overpopulated. And what they did was establish a dam in the river right away. And the natives actually burned this house down during the Indian uprising. And so the original foundation still stands. But it was rebuilt in the 1700s. Today, I was kind of all over the place. We had a lot of young people here. We were actually processing deer hide and eating venison stew together, enjoying that deer from the land here. And much of what Eastern Woodlands Rematriation does is look at that hope in all of this. It's about rekindling our trade networks, our historic alliances. It's about rematriation, about seeing our gifts and our innate power and as we contribute to the whole, right? It's not about a power over, it's about sharing and about abundance. And we do what we can to keep our practitioners practicing as much as possible. And so I would just say that that's a success story. Do you want to come here real quick? Say hi. So yeah, this is my little one, Emery, who was processing her first deer hide today. And yeah, I hope that that gives folks watching hope. We would not have been able to reclaim this land if it weren't for non-Native allies that were willing to just trust us in our leadership and not dictate or give us any sort of rules on how we would go about their generosity, but literally just making sure we were back on the land and continuing to practice and continuing to maintain those traditions and those teachings for our young ones. That's success. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's very important. Absolutely. And again, you know, we thank our allies, our non-Indigenous allies that are here to support us, to support the work, to support all of us as humans and children of Mother Earth. I want to share that we, as of now, we had 158 donors and so far we've raised $9,000. So I'm pushing and I'm hoping that we can get to 10. So if you can find it in your hearts to donate just a little bit more, you know, we're splitting this between 5 organizations and, you know, it takes so much resources to do the work that we do. So every dollar is appreciated. There is no such thing as too small of an amount. You know, most of the donors that really support Indigenous communities are those small dollar amounts. Those are the ones that really make the difference for our organizations. So I did have another question that came through on the chat, and I wanted to address it because it has to do with false solutions on climate change and mining. And, you know, as we know, Indigenous territories are being opened up for mining permits all over this continent. And so the question here for our panelists is, if it might be possible to hear more about pathways forward to address colonialism and mining, and especially lithium mining. So I open that question to our panelists, if anyone would like to take that one on.
I feel like that one was kind of pointed. One quick thing I wanted to add is one of Joy was not able to be here at the end of this, but dropped in our group chat that the struggle on Mauna Kea is a success story of Indigenous peoples protecting our lands. And that to this date, the 30-meter telescope has not been built because of Indigenous resistance and global solidarity. I myself was up on the Mauna for quite a while, camping and supporting our relatives there. And so that is a success story. So just wanted to add that and make sure Joy's voice was included. But in terms of the lithium fight, you know, I'm not gonna lie, I'm still pretty new to like what this struggle is gonna look like to tackle green colonialism. Right now, we're currently developing out a campaign within Honor the Earth. There's currently, you know, I don't even know the amount, but billions of dollars have flowed into the world's largest mining corporation, Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto now is, you know, exploring many different leases all over the so-called US and globally. For transition mining specifically, and you know, in particular around nickel mining and lithium mining, right? And so our organization, the main mine that we're, you know, battling currently is the Talon mine, which is, you know, named as being owned by Talon, but it's actually just a front for Rio Tinto to look like they're a local mine, but they're not, they're international. And so, you know, really what we're doing is we're getting ready to launch a No Green Colonialism campaign that's going to be able to fight right next to our actual boots on the ground campaign, fighting against the Talon mine itself. And so for us, I think it's really important. And what we see right now is that people aren't naming this transition as green colonialism. And so for us, it's really important that we really push that narrative as far as we can, and that we normalize the usage of that, and we call the thing what it is. And so that's kind of where we're at right now, is both fighting boots on the ground, a standard fight to prevent mining, and also a narrative battle to make sure that we're calling the things what they are, and that we're getting information out there that actually breaks down what green colonialism is and all the different mining and the transition that falls up within that, and to connect the dots back to our government that's supposed to represent us and that is supposed to be, you know, the climate leading administration, but they're really not, right? And so looking at all of the money that's being funded and like pumped into these mining corporations as well. And so we're doing all of the legwork and the research on the back end for that right now. So beyond that, I don't have a whole lot, but I'm imagining the more we get into this fight, we'll have a lot more information that we'll be pushing out.
Thank you, Krystal. And it's very important that we do call it what it is. And I think this past weekend, we had the honor and privilege of hearing one of our great elders in the Indigenous community around the world, Mr. Oren Lyons, who's a faith keeper for Onondaga Nation. And he said words matter because the words that we use in a political context are have very different meaning than the words that we use every day. And what I mean by that is our words as Indigenous peoples were being used against us on the international level. When we're calling for climate solutions and we're calling for change and we're calling for the reversal of the damage that's been done, projects are being developed and in the name of climate change. And they're being pushed by these member state governments. But the problem is that they're pushing them in Indigenous territories. They're not real solutions. As we talked about the mining, you know, that we know is not a real solution. Just because you're not extracting something from the earth, one thing from the earth doesn't mean extracting something else is better. And we as Indigenous peoples know that, but because we didn't say those things, it opens up the door for all of these projects. One of the other things that happens is what we've been seeing in the international community of Indigenous peoples is the displacement from their territories in the name of climate change, in the name of false solutions. So for example, in a small community in Mexico, they displaced an entire Indigenous community to put up a wind turbine park. And so these are the kinds of projects that are not real solutions. They are causing displacement, they're causing cultural genocide, as we spoke about earlier. When you remove Indigenous peoples from their lands and territories, it really is genocide because we are forced to assimilate into a culture that doesn't belong to us. So it's really important that when we're talking about climate solutions and we're looking at these false solutions that are being brought forward, these green colonialism, you know, things that are being talked about, we need to look into them and we need to really read what these words mean in a political context. We need to educate ourselves, not just as Indigenous peoples, but also as allies to Indigenous peoples. We need to make sure that we are protecting each other from false solutions. I know in the Shoshone territory currently, originally the US government saw their territory as a wasteland and they didn't care much for it. Gradually, they started gradual encroachment onto their territory. And now they found out that their territory is rich with lithium. And so now they want to go ahead and start looking at their territory as something valuable, which is something that they didn't care for when they thought that it was a wasteland. So these are the things, this is just a small example of stories from the Indigenous international community that we're hearing. And it's important for us to highlight that because as our sister here, Krystal says, we have to call it what it is, and it is green colonialism. So I do have one more question. We do have a few more minutes. So the question is, what will it take for people from many different movements to show urgent solidarity with Indigenous peoples?
What a question. I mean, that's a great question and a big question. I'll just speak to, like, I think it kind of comes back to some of what you were just saying about like language and understanding like the situation that we're in, and like green colonialism, but also like carbon fundamentalism, right? Like this idea that we can like buy credits and still continue to pollute and have these same systems of extraction, just with different technology. And really helping people feel like they have a place to access that information and that knowledge and connection with each other. Because I think one of the hardest things is there's so many people that feel really moved to be a part of this work, or feel like really impacted by how unjust it is and how terribly violent these systems are to all of us. But then I think also a lot of times people feel very isolated, or feel as if they have to take this on by themselves, and that that seems untenable, or like not achievable. And I think that sometimes that causes people to just check out again to what we talked about earlier, with just like numbness and disconnection. And so I think really all of it to me comes back to making sure that as much as possible, there's points of connection for being able to understand this work and move into it with each other.
Yeah, I want to jump in as well and just name that we're doing it right here. We're asking for investment into our work. And I think that's really a real thing, because when Indigenous peoples in leadership are invested in, we are some of the best land stewards in the world. We protect 80% of the world's biodiversity, despite being only 20% of the world's population. We've done this since time immemorial. Our teachings and our practices predate colonization anywhere in the world. And we've been doing this. We already know that to be true, because you can look at tribes like the Yakama Nation, who had access to the resources and now have some of the best forest management plans in the world, and they steward those forests. You can look at the Plains tribes with some of the last untouched grasslands that exist in the world. That's, my people, Lakota people, and also Omaha, but the folks within, what's now known as South Dakota, Nebraska, are tending to and caring for some of the last untouched grasslands in the world, And so when we are invested in, and when our leadership is truly followed unconditionally, right? That means without conditions, without parameters being placed on us, that means we can do that work. And Evie named it in the very beginning, is we don't do this work just for ourselves. When we fight pipelines that we know are going to burst and contaminate water, we don't do that for ourselves. That's for everyone that lives downstream. That's for everyone that needs clean water to survive, right? And so we do this work on behalf of everybody, on behalf of humanity, as Evie said earlier. And so when we ask to be invested in, and when we ask for our leadership to be followed, then that is what needs to happen. And I think those are two of the best possible ways that folks can really support us in this work.
Thank you, Krystal. And I wanted to, we're running out of time, and so I did want to wrap up, but I did want to thank Kristen. I see your little one walking around back there, and I appreciate that she's present, because as Indigenous peoples, they are the reason why we do what we do. Our children, our grandchildren, and the 7 generations ahead. And having them front and center is important. I think Western society has taught us to hide our children away when we're doing work. But for us as Indigenous peoples, we involve them in the work. We teach them the importance of clean water and how to take care of Mother Earth, and how to take care of the plants and all of their relatives, because they are the ones who have to carry this on when we're done, when we're no longer here. And so I want to say thank you for that. And I also want to share with our non-Indigenous relatives that when we as Indigenous people make decisions, every decision that we make, big decisions, we make them with the 7 generations ahead of us in mind. We don't think of ourselves And sometimes we don't even think of our children or our grandchildren. We're thinking of their children and their grandchildren and the great, great ones that come after that, just as our ancestors have. And so it's important that to think about that, because when you have political leaders who make decisions based on their own needs and greed, we end up in a situation that we're in now. And so I wanted to thank again all of our speakers for being present with us today, for sharing your work, for sharing your knowledge. And I wanted to also share with all of our attendees on the webinar today how you can follow up with this call to action. We will continue to receive donations. We are very grateful. And like we mentioned before, there is no dollar amount that is too small. Every single penny makes a big difference in the work that we do. So in conclusion of this webinar, we will be sending out a follow-up email. It will include a recording of the webinar, a Rethinking Thanksgiving toolkit, a survey so that you can share with us how we can do better for next year, and ways to take action, how to support the work of not just the Indigenous organizations that you saw here today, but all Indigenous peoples. It'll also include social media links and information on how you can reach out to organizations individually. I would also like to take the time to thank all of our organizing team, our speakers, our ASL and Spanish interpreters, and the live caption writers. We thank you very much, because it is so important that all of us have access to this information. We all have the right to equally learn from each other in ways, and sometimes it takes work for us to do that, and we are willing to do it. And so I want to thank our interpreters and our ASL interpreters as well once again. Again, please follow our speakers on social media, follow their organizations. You can also subscribe to all of the organizations on social media. And if it's possible, I would absolutely love it if we can bring on all of our webinar team that helped put this together, if we can bring them all on screen, because it's really important to know that it takes months for us to plan this. There's a lot of technicalities and technical work that comes along with putting this together, many nights of planning. And so I hope that we can bring up our non-Indigenous and Indigenous allies that have been putting in the work for the last few months to make this successful. There they are. Please, everybody give them a hand. Thank you all so much for your efforts. Thank you for standing in solidarity with us as Indigenous peoples, but not just for us, but for all of us. Thank you again, and this concludes our webinar. Tlazohcamati.